In 1904, a forester in New York noticed a few orange-yellow spots on the bark of a chestnut tree at the Bronx Zoo. Nobody thought much of it. Inside 40 years, 4 billion American chestnuts were dead. A quarter of the entire eastern hardwood forest gone. And up in these mountains, that wasn't a tree dying, that was the food going. A mature chestnut could feed a family for a year. It fattened the hogs and the turkeys. It went into the bread. It went to market for cash money in the fall. Then it was simply not there anymore, and people had to eat something else. What they came up with is this list. Here's the twist. Number 14 isn't raised with yeast. It's raised by a bacterium, and scientists only worked out which one about 20 years ago. Number 12 would get you a citation in most states if you did it the old way today. And number 1 was the wedding cake. The neighbors each brought a layer, and the number of layers told you how well loved the bride was. These aren't quaint mountain recipes. Most of them were invented by people doing arithmetic with what was left in November and deciding whether it would reach April. Before we start, hit subscribe. Let's count down 25 forgotten Appalachian dinners that fed a family on almost nothing. Number 25, gritted bread. Corn comes in 3 stages, and the middle one had its own bread. Roasting ears are too soft to grind, and dry corn is too hard to do anything but mill. But for about 2 weeks in between, the kernels go past sweet and turn doughy. That's gritting corn. You took an ear and rubbed it down a gritter, a piece of tin punched full of holes with the ragged side out, nailed to a board. What came off was a wet meal, half milk, half starch. Mixed with a little salt and grease and baked in a skillet, it made a bread you cannot get any other way, because you cannot buy the ingredient. It exists for 2 weeks a year, and it doesn't keep. Pappy's people watched for it the way you'd watch for a court date. Miss the window, and you wait until next August. Number 24, fried mush. Cornmeal, water, salt, cooked down slow into a thick porridge and poured into a loaf pan overnight. In the morning, it had set firm enough to turn out and slice, and those slices went into a hot grease skillet until the outside crusted. That's it. That's the whole thing. Cornmeal eaten twice. The reason it mattered is arithmetic. Mush eaten hot is 1 meal. Mush chilled, sliced, and fried is breakfast for 4 days, and it goes further with a spoonful of sorghum on it than it ever did in a bowl. The failure is in the setting. Too much water and the slices break apart in the pan and you've got scrambled cornmeal. It has to be stiff enough that a spoon stands in it before it goes in the pan to chill. Number 23, sawmill gravy and cathead biscuits. Named cathead because the biscuits came out about the size of one. Big, ragged, dropped instead of cut. And the gravy was 3 ingredients: the grease left in the skillet, a scoop of flour, and milk. The technique is where it lives or dies. You cook the flour in the hot grease first, stirring, until it goes the color of a paper sack. That's toasting out the raw taste, and it's why some milk gravy tastes like paste and some tastes like something. Then the milk goes in slow, off the heat, whisking, or it seizes into lumps you'll never get out. 2 cups of milk and a spoon of flour stretched a ½ pound of meat across a table of 8. The meat became a seasoning. The gravy became the meal. Number 22, killed lettuce. Early spring, the first leaf lettuce comes in thin and bitter, and there's nothing else green on the place. So you tore it into a bowl with green onions, fried bacon or fatback until the grease ran, and poured that grease over the lettuce boiling hot. It wilts instantly. Killed. That's the name, and that's the description. A splash of vinegar in the hot grease first cuts through it. What you get is a warm, sharp, fatty green that no cold salad on earth resembles. Killed lettuce ran in a specific window. after the root cellar had been eaten empty and before anything else was ready. It landed exactly when a family hadn't seen a fresh vegetable since October. Number 21, fried apples. Not a dessert, a side dish, served with pork 3 seasons a year. Tart apples, cored, sliced thick, and put in a skillet with bacon grease over medium heat. They go in firm and they come out collapsed and caramelized, and the whole business takes about 20 minutes. Sugar only at the end, and not much. The apple's own sugar concentrates as the water cooks out, and adding sugar early draws the water out too fast and stews them instead of frying them. That's the failure mode, and it's the one everybody hits. Any hard apple works. Wine saps and Virginia beauties were the mountain standard because they held their shape and didn't turn to sauce. Number 20, cushaw. A crookneck squash, striped green and white, that grows to 20 pounds and keeps in a cool room until February without canning, without a cellar, without anything. That last part is why it mattered. Most winter food costs you labor, canning, drying, salting. A cushaw costs you nothing but a place to set it. The flesh is milder and wetter than pumpkin, so it was baked or cooked down with sorghum into a pudding, or used in pies where anybody else would use pumpkin. Mountain families grew it up corn stalks, so it took no extra ground. They're getting scarce now. Seed keeps circulating through swamps in western North Carolina and East Tennessee, but you will not find one in a grocery store. Number 19, chow chow. The end of the garden in one jar. When frost was coming and there were still green tomatoes, cabbage, peppers, and onions on the vine that would never ripen, you chopped the whole lot, salted it overnight to pull the water, then cooked it in vinegar with sugar and mustard seed and put it up. Every family's was different, because chow chow isn't a recipe. It's a solution to a specific problem. The garden is dying and none of this will ripen. What went in depended on what was still standing. Then it sat on the table all winter and went on top of soup beans, where it did the work that a fresh vegetable would have done if there had been one. Acid and crunch against something soft and starchy. That's the whole job. Those were the sides. Now the ones that came out of hog killing, and those are where the real arithmetic starts. Number 18, souse. Hog killing produced parts that spoil fastest and can't be salted. The head, the feet, the ears, the tongue. Souse is what those became. You simmer them for hours until the meat falls and the liquid goes thick with natural gelatin. Pick the meat, chop it, season it heavy with vinegar, salt, black and red pepper, pack it into a crock or a pan, and pour the cooking liquid back over. It sets as it cools, because that collagen turns to gel. No packet, no powder, just what was already in the feet. Sliced cold on bread, it was dinner. The vinegar isn't for flavor alone. The acid does real preservation work, which is what let it sit in a cold pantry through a stretch of winter. Number 17, livermush. This one belongs to a specific place. Livermush is western North Carolina, Cleveland, Lincoln, Rutherford, Catawba counties, and it came south with German settlers through the Shenandoah Valley in the 1700s, where the same idea turns into scrapple in Pennsylvania. The difference is the grain. Scrapple uses buckwheat. Livermush uses cornmeal, because that's what grew here, and it has to be at least 30% liver by definition. Less than that, and you've made liver pudding, which is a different thing, and uses flour. Hog liver, head meat, cornmeal, sage and pepper, cooked into a loaf and chilled until sliceable, then fried in a dry pan until the outside crusts. It's still sold in grocery stores in those counties, and almost nowhere else on earth. Number 16, sour corn. Corn cut off the cob, packed in a crock under a saltwater brine, weighted down, and left to sour for 2 to 4 weeks at room temperature. What's happening is lactofermentation. The salt holds off the organisms you don't want, while lactobacillus, already living on the corn, eats the sugars and turns them to lactic acid. And once the acidity drops far enough, nothing dangerous can grow. Same chemistry as sauerkraut, different vegetable. And here's the part worth knowing. Sour corn predates the settlers who brought kraut to these mountains. Cherokee cooks were souring corn first, and a soured corn drink is still served to respected guests. The cardinal rule is that the corn stays under the brine. Let it surface and mold takes the crock. Number 15, pickled beans. Same crock, same principle, often the same jar. Green beans, snapped and usually cooked briefly first, then packed under brine and left to sour alongside the corn. Soured beans don't taste like green beans. They go tangy and firm and slightly funky, closer to a pickle than a vegetable. And mountain families ate them all winter, warmed in bacon grease until they sputtered. The reason both of these existed is that a crock in a cool corner needed nothing. No jars, no lids, no pressure canner, no fuel to process. You built a brine, you weighted it down, you walked away for a month. Compare that to a day spent canning, and you understand why the crock outlasted every other method until glass jars got cheap. Number 14, salt rising bread. Now here's one where the science is genuinely strange, and it's real. Salt rising bread has no yeast in it. The starter is flour, milk, and potato, left warm overnight until it goes active and smells. And the smell is famous. Sharp and cheesy and off-putting to people who didn't grow up with it. For most of its history, nobody knew what was actually raising it. Microbiologists have now identified the organism and its Clostridium perfringens, which is, in other contexts, a common cause of food poisoning from meat and gravy. Before you throw out your grandmother's recipe, the strains in the bread show no evidence of producing the toxins, no evidence of even carrying the genes for them, and no illness has ever been traced to salt-rising bread. Baking reduces it further. It also explains the texture. That bacterium makes mostly hydrogen gas, rather than the carbon dioxide yeast makes, and hydrogen is lighter, which is why the crumb comes out so dense and fine. Number 13, cornbread and milk. The simplest thing on this list, and the one most people have never heard of. You crumble cold cornbread into a tall glass, pour buttermilk or sweet milk over it, and eat it with a spoon. That was supper. Not a snack, not a side, supper. Thousands of times, in thousands of houses, usually at the end of a day when there wasn't anything else and everybody was too tired to cook. It's also better nutrition than it sounds. Cornbread alone is an incomplete protein. Milk fills in what corn is missing. Nobody in a holler was thinking about amino acids. They just knew it stuck to you, and it took 90 seconds. From here down, we're into food most people alive have never tasted, and the first one will get you a citation in most states. Number 12, wild meat on a weeknight. Groundhog, squirrel, rabbit, possum, coon. Let me be straight before anything else. Nearly all of this is regulated now. Every Appalachian state runs seasons, bag limits, and license requirements on small game, and several species that were routinely eaten are protected outright. Doing this the old way, take it when you see it, any month, no tag, is a citation in most states today, and in some cases a serious one. Check your state wildlife agency before you go anywhere near it. But it needs saying that this was not novelty food, and it was not desperation. It was Tuesday. A squirrel is a pound of meat that costs a single shell, and a boy who could bring in 3 before school changed what went in the pot that night. The cooking was built around toughness. Old squirrel and groundhog are working muscle, so they were parboiled first to tenderize and to pull the strong flavor. Then the water was thrown out and the meat went into a fresh pot with onions, or into gravy, or into dumplings. Skipping the parboil is the mistake. Go straight to the skillet with an old animal and you've made something nobody at the table will finish. Groundhog in particular has scent glands under the front legs that have to come out during cleaning. Leave them and the whole pot tastes like it. This is the food that gets laughed at now. It kept an enormous number of people alive and it cost almost nothing but a walk. Pappy didn't think it was quaint. He thought it was Tuesday. Number 11. Vinegar pie. There are no lemons in a mountain holler in February. There never were. So a cook took white vinegar, hot water, sugar, butter, flour, and nutmeg, cooked it into a custard, and put it in a crust. What comes out is bright and tart and reads genuinely like a lemon pie, because what you actually taste in lemon custard is acid against sugar and fat, and vinegar supplies the acid perfectly well. It gets called a depression recipe. It's older than that. Vinegar pie shows up in the mid-1800s in exactly the same circumstance. People who wanted a tart pie and had no access to citrus used plain white vinegar. Cider vinegar carries too much of its own flavor, and the pie tastes like what it's made of instead of what it's imitating. Number 10. Water pie. And then there's the one below vinegar pie. Water, sugar, flour, butter, salt, vanilla if there was any. That is the entire filling, and the name is not a joke or an exaggeration. You pour water into the shell, scatter the flour and sugar over it without stirring, dot the butter on top, and bake. It sets into something between a custard and a caramel. The flour thickens, the sugar and butter go golden and rise toward the top, and it comes out looking like a pie that had ingredients. Water pie belongs to a category food historians call desperation pies, and it exists for a reason that isn't about hunger. It's about the table looking normal. There was no fruit, no eggs, no milk, and a family put a pie out anyway, because that's what you did on Sunday, and doing what you did on Sunday was worth something. Number 9. Persimmon pudding. American persimmons are not the grocery store kind. They're small, they grow wild across the whole southern range, and picked one day too early, they will turn your entire mouth inside out. The astringency is violent and unforgettable. They have to go dead ripe, soft to the point of collapse, usually after frost. Then the pulp gets worked through a colander to strip the seeds and skins, mixed with buttermilk, eggs, sugar, and flour, and baked slow in a flat pan until it goes dark. It comes out somewhere between a cake and a custard, dense and sticky, and it falls as it cools. That's supposed to happen. A persimmon pudding that stays puffed didn't have enough pulp in it. Free food off a tree nobody planted in the 1 month when the garden was finished. Number 8. Canucci. This one is Cherokee, and it is older than everything else on this list. Hickory nuts, gathered in October. The outer hulls come off, and the nuts are dried on a rack in front of a fire. Then, and this is the part that sounds wrong, the nuts get pounded shell and all into a mass, and that mass is worked into balls the size of a fist and stored. To use it, you drop a ball into boiling water. The heavy shell fragments sink, and the nut oil and meat come free into the water, turning it into a rich cream. You strain it off and pour it over hominy. It's a storage technology as much as a soup. A hickory nut into shell is a chore. A hickory nut ball is a winter's worth of fat and protein in a form you can stack on a shelf. Canucci balls were a primary winter food, and hickory is one of the few nuts that survived the blight untouched. Number 7. Bean bread. Also Cherokee, and also built on the 2 crops that carried this continent, corn and beans. Cornmeal and cooked beans are worked into a stiff dough, then wrapped in soaked hickory leaves or corn shucks, tied with river grass or a strip of husk, and boiled about an hour. The wrapping isn't decoration, and it isn't just a container. The leaf holds the parcel together in the water, and it puts flavor in from the outside. and the seal matters. A loose tie lets water in, and you pull a bag of cornmeal soup out of the kettle instead of bread. Nutritionally, this is a whole game in one package. Corn is short on lysine. Beans are long on it. Beans are short on methionine. Corn has it. Put them together and you get a complete protein, which is a thing people worked out by living 400 years before anybody could explain it. The last 6 are the ones that defined a mountain table. Number 3 doesn't exist anymore, and it can't be brought back. Number 6, sonker. Sonker is Surry County, North Carolina, and nearly nowhere else. It's a deep dish fruit cobbler, but bigger and looser than a cobbler. Made in a pan, made in quantity, made to feed a field crew. Sweet potato is the traditional filling, which surprises people. Also strawberry, cherry, peach, blackberry, whatever the season handed you. Some versions get a batter poured over, some a rolled crust, some a lattice, and there is no agreement whatsoever on which is correct. The thing that makes it sonker rather than cobbler is the dip, a thin, sweet milk sauce poured over each serving at the table. Surry County still runs a sonker trail. It's one of the very few dishes on this list that a region deliberately organized to keep alive, which is a strategy the rest of this food never got. Number 5, red-eye gravy. 2 ingredients, and one of them is coffee. You fry a slice of country ham, salt-cured, hard, dark, in a hot iron skillet and take it out. What's left is fat and the brown salt and protein stuck to the pan. Pour black coffee straight into that hot skillet and scrape. That's the whole thing. No flour, no milk, no thickener. It stays thin, it's aggressively salty, and it's the exact opposite of sawmill gravy in every way. It went over biscuits or over grits. The failure is heat. The pan has to still be hot enough that the coffee hits it and hisses. That's what lifts the browned fond off the iron. Pour it into a cooling skillet and you've made salty coffee sitting in grease. Number 4, dried apple. Before cellars and before jars, an apple got preserved by having the water taken out of it. Sliced thin, laid on screens or clean cloth on a shed roof, covered with cheesecloth against flies, turned daily, and brought in every night before the dew. 3 to 4 days of good sun and they're leathery and will keep a year in a sack in a dry room. The failure is bringing them in too soon. An apple slice that still has give in the middle will mold in the sack by December and take the ones around it. They have to be dry enough to feel like leather, not like fruit. Dried apples went into fried pies, into stacked cake, into sauce all winter, and pound for pound they carried more sugar and more calories than the fresh apple did, because everything but the sugar had evaporated. Number 3, chestnut bread and chestnut dressing. This is the one that cannot come back. Before 1904, American chestnuts made up a quarter of the eastern hardwood forest, and a mature tree could feed a family for a year. In the fall, they came down in quantities you had to see to believe, and mountain families gathered them by the bushel. They were roasted, boiled, dried, and ground into a flour, worked into breads and puddings and porridge, cooked into a dressing with cornmeal and sage that went alongside every fall table. And they were cash. A family could take chestnuts to market in the fall and come home with the money that bought shoes and coffee and salt for the winter. That was a significant part of a mountain household's entire annual income, and it grew on a tree nobody planted or tended. Then the blight came into New York in 1904. And moved south through these mountains at up to 50 miles a year. By 1940, it had functionally killed 4 billion trees. The recipes survived. People still make chestnut dressing, with Chinese chestnuts or Italian ones bought in a store. What nobody living has tasted is the American chestnut, which was sweeter and smaller, and which was free. Number 2, soup beans and cornbread. If you had to reduce all of Appalachian food to one plate, this is it. Dried pintos, or October beans, picked over, soaked overnight, then simmered 4 to 6 hours with a piece of fatback or a ham hock until the beans break down and the liquid goes thick and brown. That liquid is the point. Soup beans aren't beans in water. They're beans that made their own gravy, and it's called soup beans because you eke the broth. Alongside, a skillet of cornbread, no sugar, cooked in hot grease so the bottom crusts. Onion on the side, chow-chow on top. Salt goes in at the end. Salt the pot early, and the skins toughen and the beans never break down, and you'll simmer them 6 hours and still be chewing. That plate cost pennies, took no skill, and fed a family of 8. It's still the answer in 10,000 houses, and it was Pappy's supper more nights than any other thing on this list. Number 1, the apple stack cake. And here's the one that wasn't about hunger at all. A stack cake is 6 to 8 layers, and the layers aren't cake. They're a stiff, dry, cookie-like dough with sorghum and ginger in it, rolled and baked thin and hard. Between every layer goes a thick, spiced, dried apple filling. Then it has to sit, overnight at minimum, 2 or 3 days better. The moisture from the apples migrates into those dry layers and softens them, and the whole thing goes from a stack of hard discs into one dense, moist, sliceable cake. That waiting isn't tradition, it's the recipe. Cut it the day you build it, and you'll break a fork on it. But the reason to end on this one is what it was for. Sugar was dear, and a proper tiered wedding cake was out of reach for a mountain family. So according to the oral history, when there was a wedding, the neighbors each brought a layer. The bride's family made the apple filling and stacked what came in, and the number of layers told you how many people cared enough to bake. The cake was a head count. It was the community writing down, in a form you could slice, exactly how well loved this girl was, and it was legible to everybody in the room without a word being said. Nobody wrote the layers down in a book. The cake got eaten. Pappy's generation carried the count in their heads, and then they were gone. And what's left is a recipe on a card with a number of layers on it, and no way at all to know whose neighbors those were. Here's my challenge. Pick one, just one. Fry corn-made mush and eat it with sorghum. Pour boiling bacon grease over a bowl of torn lettuce and find out what killed means. Or put dried apples between hard ginger layers, wrap the whole thing in a towel, and leave it alone for 3 days. Then tell me in the comments, what did your people call it, and what county were they in? Because half of these have 4 names depending on which side of a ridge you were raised on, and I want the one your family used. Because none of this was cuisine. It was arithmetic done in November about whether the food would reach April by people who got the answer right often enough that we're all here. They knew. Now it's written down.